matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, case number BA096.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
Hey Taylor, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm tired from driving to Dallas and traveling, and I'm sure you are too. But why don't you go ahead and introduce us, and then we can do some light banter about our weeks and
Sounds
weekends.
good. Sounds good. Welcome to Doomed to Fail. We are the podcast that brings you history's most notorious disasters and epic failures twice a week, every week. And I'm Taylor, joined as always by Farz.
Always, always here, never change.
Always.
Yeah, so you've had a travel week too, or weekend.
Yeah, I mean, we skipped recording last week. We were all sick over here, and then we had to go to Maryland to visit family. And we were supposed to leave the day that all of the internet went down for airplanes. I know you were traveling that day too. You had to get on a bus,
I took a
right?
bus. Yeah, it was basically
Ugh.
trains is the only thing I miss, but I took
Mm.
an Uber car to an airport to catch a flight to another airport where everything was down. Actually, Taylor, I don't know if I told you this, but if I had tried to wait for that flight that was 6.5 hours after when I decided that I'm just going to catch the bus, it got canceled anyways. It got pushed to 5:15 a.m. the next morning and got canceled. So,
The 5:15 got canceled.
yeah,
So mine was wild. Like I was a late flight anyway. It was like a 12:30 midnight flight. Direct to Baltimore from Las Vegas. We're 3 hours from Las Vegas. So we were like gonna drive there, but they kept pushing it back. And then finally they were like, okay, it's at 3:30 in the morning. And I'm like, I don't even know if we can do that. Like, should we go to Las Vegas and try to get a hotel? And then I saw that it was canceled, but I wasn't getting anything from the airline. Like I couldn't get online. I couldn't get onto my account. And then they texted and said, oh, we got it back at the regular scheduled time. And I was like, but we're not there. Like
yeah.
we're 3 hours away. So we finally got, and we bought another flight for the next day. So we were just like delayed an entire day. And look, I'm glad that we stayed home that night. We weren't like stuck in Las Vegas and like whatever. So we stayed home and then we went the next day on a different flight. And it was a pain, but
You
we did
missed,
it.
yeah, you missed out on the insane amount of anxiety and the backup of people because the airport that I was stuck at was super busy.
Yeah.
And so even getting services like just a drink or something to eat was kind of a nightmare. And also everybody around you was just super pissed off and you could feel it in the air.
Oh
Um,
no, totally. I was like, and then I was so upset at the end of the day because I was like, I tried so hard all day and like I thought it was canceled. Maybe I read the wrong thing. I know they told me it was 3 a.m., but then like I can't delay your flight 3 hours and then bring it back,
yeah,
you know? Like that's
yeah.
not fair. So anyway, we got a oh, like a credit for that flight, but we still have we still paid more for the other one, but whatever.
Yeah,
We did
same.
it. Yeah, we did it. We went. We had a great time. We went to the White House. Super cool. I put a bunch of stuff on Instagram because I went to the National Gallery, which is I love, and just like around every corner is a painting that we know about. There was Leonardo da Vinci there. The famous Madame du Barry that I have posted a lot is there. So that was cool. It was very fun.
Nice, nice. I saw the
Yeah.
pictures. They look really, really
Yeah.
fun. I've
Yeah.
never been in the White House. Every time I've been to DC, I make it a point to kind of go there because mostly I just want to see like what people are pissed off and screaming at the White House about.
Fair. Yeah, yeah. Well, we were there the day that Netanyahu was there. But it wasn't, I didn't see anything crazy. You know, there were
Yeah,
people obviously like with signs and stuff when we were by like the National Mall, but it was like maybe 10% full of people. I didn't see anything bad and I wasn't like afraid at all. I was worried there was going to be like hard to get around and it was a little bit hard to get around. There's street closures, but DC is hard to drive around on a good day.
yeah, yeah. So you
So
were in
like
the front of the White House. Every time I've been there, I've gone around to the back of it.
we were in the
Um,
back. We went in the you go in the East Wing and then it's like a self-guided tour. You just kind of walk through and you're through all like the big reception rooms and you see all the famous paintings like the George Washington that Dolly Madison saved during the War of 1812 is there. A bunch of like great famous paintings are there. So
got it, got it. Yeah,
it's
no,
cool.
in that part that I usually go, there's almost always a group of people there like protesting something, and so
Oh yeah.
it is a trip. But I'm glad
Yeah.
you guys got there, had fun, and were able to get home safe and sound.
Hmm.
As I'm glad I am too.
Yeah.
So,
Ugh,
um, that being said, let's go ahead and dive in for today. I assume I'm going first today.
you are.
Okay.
Um, we could talk about something
So,
else first.
yes.
Did you watch the opening ceremony of the Olympics?
Um, not all the way through. I saw bits and pieces of it.
I loved it. A lot of people were complaining, but they have to remember that it's always really fucking weird. That's the thing. It's a weird show. And I thought it was so cool. They went like all over Paris. I'd be pissed if I bought a ticket to it because you probably only saw one little tiny thing because it wasn't like in a stadium. But it was great. I cried. I laughed. It was wonderful.
I loved the people that were comparing it to Henry Zabrowski, that one guy in the blue. You
Oh,
know,
the Bacchus. And then people were like, it was the Last Supper. And it's like, it's a Greek, you idiots. But you know,
I don't because I don't watch it, but I saw the memes of everybody in the last podcast Facebook group of everybody comparing that guy to Henry. And I saw
it's
that was funny.
amazing.
Also, I messaged our old friend Johnny who lives in Paris, and I was like, "Are you there? Are you watching?" He's like, "No, even just like even being able to see any part of it, you have to buy really expensive tickets." And
Yeah.
so we're just like in our place in Paris watching it on TV. I was like, "All right, well, so be it."
But can they see the flame? The flame's up in the air on a hot air balloon.
Is that what happened? God, I missed all of it.
Yeah.
I really missed.
It was
I
really
really,
cool.
I really missed it.
They like Serena Williams and Rafael Nadal and Carl Lewis were on a boat and then holding the flame after the flame like went all the way around. And then there was like this cool mechanical horse and this like rider of the Olympic thing. And then then like 10 famous French athletes kind of passed the torch to each other and they kind of jogged together. There were some Paralympic athletes. There's a guy who's like the oldest living French Olympian, just turned 100 years old. Like he's not in it now, obviously, but like he was before. So he was there. And
Thanks for
then
clarifying, Taylor.
I just want to make that clear. And then they lit it. It was on a hot air balloon. They lit it. Then it went up into the air, and the Eiffel Tower lit up, and Celine Dion sang. And that's wonderful because she's so sick.
Yeah, I thought she was
She's great.
dying.
Yeah, she's not doing well, but she looked beautiful and sang beautifully and was wonderful.
I saw, where I cut it off was I waited until the USA boat showed up
Hmm.
and then I cut it off. Did everything happen after that basically, or did I miss the beginning?
I don't know. Did you see Lady Gaga?
No.
She was dressed like a flamingo, kind of. She sang in French, a bunch of like really weird dancing.
Oh, I think it was happening at the same time. I think okay, so I think the presentation of the athletes on the boat was
Yes,
happening at the same time as the actual event part of it, and so the cameras just
yes.
pan back and forth. Okay,
Which is why if you bought a ticket, people were pissed because they like it didn't matter. Like you only saw a little part of the show,
right,
Like you
right,
saw all the boats, but you didn't see like everything, which I thought
right.
was wonderful. Everyone looked really great. Everyone was so excited. It was raining and it just looked very pretty and great.
Glad you got your money's worth.
It did. I did. I did. I loved it.
Is there anything else you want to sound announce before?
No, we just have some. Well, there was a little bit of an arson attack on the railway before, but it seems like that nobody was hurt. So that was like the first thing. And we have some. I think. Wait, let me look at the medal account right now, just to
Should we
announce something
just
that will be old news.
Yeah, should we just start having like for the next 2 weeks Olympic news session section?
Absolutely, absolutely. So we have 12 medals so far. Um, wait, what is this? What is this one? So seven medals. We have 12 medals so far. Three golds. Uh, oh, very fun. In swimming. So anyway, we got a silver in women's synchronized diving, which was fun. This morning we stayed at a hotel last night and we watched this morning archery. And the Korean women's archery team won gold for the 10th time in a row. It was so cool.
Sweet.
Yeah, it was really fun. So yeah,
You are just living it up, aren't you?
I love it. What can
That's
you do?
awesome. What can you do? Yeah, so join us next week for our Olympic medal count ceremony.
That will be outdated by the time you listen to it.
Yes, yes. Speaking of which, what I'm going to talk about is going to be outdated by the time y'all listen to it.
Great.
And this is supposedly coming out in like 12 hours from now, so it's going to be outdated by then.
Perfect.
But we'll go ahead and hop right in. I was all over the map with my content for this week. Taylor, just like a little bit of like behind the scenes for you. I started researching these like horrible, horrible murder content, and I was just so sick of it. I was like, I can't do another like murder thing, and
Hmm.
and I'm just like thinking, like just free flowing, thinking of like what can I think about? And I was making coffee this morning, and it's like coffee. How many people have died over coffee? Like, what has happened that's been horrible for coffee? And I started Googling. It's
Yeah,
like, yes,
yeah.
there's been like civil wars and revolutions caused by control of coffee and coffee routes in El Salvador and all these other countries. And so I started researching,
Hmm.
okay, I bet there's a lot of downstream impact of these coffee wars in a place like El Salvador or Colombia. And I started researching immigration. And I realized that El Salvador is like not even like the top 10 in terms of immigration,
Hmm.
people coming over from the border. And so I started looking like who was in the top 10 and what does it consist of. So obviously everybody is aware that like immigration is like a huge topic in the US at this point. And
Hmm.
I don't really follow it very much. I mean, I don't, I, you know me, Taylor, I don't follow anything very much. And so I don't actually know what the big deal is or what people are talking so much about. But I started pulling some numbers on it and basically trying to gauge why it's a big deal. So
Hmm.
I pulled out that in 2023 there was 2.4 million people that were trying to cross illegally across the border,
Hmm.
and that was pretty much what it was in 2022. By comparison, in 2021 it was like 1.6 million,
Hmm.
and that was the highest ever. So from 2021 until now, it's like been the highest it's ever been over like the course of about 20 some odd years.
Hmm.
And I started researching into this. It was like, what is like, where are the countries that folks are coming from? And obviously, no surprise, Mexico's number one, Guatemala's number two, Cuba's number three, Honduras is number four, and Venezuela is number five. And
Are
that
you talking
set
about
me
Venezuela?
that, yes.
Okay, so okay, I just told you this, and I think I told you before we started recording. But my brother and his wife just got into a car accident, and I'm waiting to hear from them. They're fine. They're in an ambulance. They're gonna be okay. But his wife, Lowry, is from Venezuela, and she was texting us about this election that's happening.
No way. That's so
Yes.
random.
Yeah. So
Well, sorry
I want
about.
you to know more because I Googled a little bit of it when she texted a couple hours ago. So
Okay,
tell me
so
more.
first off, we're hoping everything's fine. And if you have to go, like I said, just go.
Thank you.
But in the meantime, so actually, so this episode's gonna be um out of date by the time y'all listen to it. But now that you told me that, Taylor, it's actually out of date now. So
Great.
part of the outline I'm gonna have to just tweak in the moment that we're talking. So, um, yes, I got the number five most populous, highest volume of people who have been kind of caught trying to cross into the southern border of the United States and Venezuela is an interesting one because, like I said, it kind of dovetails with a lot of things that are kind of going on in the U.S. at the moment. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I also found this really interesting because even though Venezuela is number five, that's in total count of people that are coming into the country. In terms of percentage of the country that is coming into the US, it is number one. Because over
Wow.
the past 10 years, about a quarter, one out of every four Venezuelans has tried to cross into the US border.
Wow.
And and there's something like you just pointed out that's going on literally right now that if it happens, the predictions are that about one in three Venezuelans that are currently still there will be trying to make that crossing. Um,
Wow.
Taylor, do you know what I might be talking about that is also salient to our current situation where we have a fresh-faced female political leader promising a new future compared to a old, broken down yesteryear's Politico?
Yeah, no, okay, so here's what I know. I know there's an election going on right now, and I looked up the person that my sister-in-law told me about, and I saw that he was 74. That's all I know so far.
Ah, okay, there's so much to say about that, so let's get
I
into
know
it.
there's a
So
lot more, but I was like, cool. But continue.
no. So it is super confusing. But I'm gonna get into it because basically right now, the election in reality is between a woman named Maria Corina Machado and
Hmm.
a guy named Nicolas Maduro. But if you look at the ballots right now, it's actually between a guy named Edmundo Gonzalez Urrutia versus
Yeah.
Maduro. So
Yes.
let me get
Okay, tell
into
me all about it.
we're gonna get into it. And this is like
Great.
super interesting. I probably learned more researching this than I have any other. Well, I probably learned more about like the world than any other episode I researched. So let's dive into it. So basically, everything in Venezuela really, really, truly started going to shit around 1999, and it never really picked up from there. And up to today, we're kind of contending with the decisions that were made that far ago. So in 1999, and some years before, some years after, it's like around 1999 is when this all happened. Venezuela underwent what is known as the Bolivarian Revolution, which was a political movement which a man named Hugo Chavez was the leader of, whose name we
Hmm.
might be familiar with. In context that we can understand, is essentially a political party. That's what the revolution really was. It was bringing up to prominence this political party. And it would be something to the effect of, for example, if the Green Party and Joel Stein were to like take over today, like it would be like a massive swing in politics that would just be like
Hmm.
unheard of in our country, for example. So
Hmm.
going a little further back in Venezuelan history, the high notes really were around the discovery of the of oil reserves within Venezuela. So
Hmm.
around the 1900s, early 1900s, was when the full depth of the vastness of Venezuelan oil reserves was understood and was discovered and able to be exploited. So, for context, Venezuela outranks Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, and the US, and literally every other country in the world in terms of having the largest oil reserves in the world.
Holy
Crazy,
shit.
right?
I did not know that.
Yeah, I didn't know that either. So Venezuela has so Venezuela got into oil production and was a leader in many ways in oil production. For example, it was actually them who suggested and moved towards the formation of OPEC with the Persian Gulf states. Like they were big, big players in all this.
Hmm.
So during this time, as they exploited oil and oil became a bigger part of everybody's life, their economy obviously grew and the standard of living improved. So people were basically living that dream of I want what my kids to have better than I had. That was basically the
Hmm.
reality. Everything was growing. Everything was looking very rosy at the time. So it's also interesting as I was researching this because it is when you look at things like over the span of like 100 years, you can see
Hmm.
logically why a decision was made. But then you zoom out over
Hmm.
the course of that 100 years, you're like, oh my God, how could you not see this was coming? And I kept
Yeah.
thinking that as I was reading this, like every paragraph I went further into this, it's like, how could you not see this coming? But like, anyways,
Yeah.
so I'm going to start dropping hints on where things start not to be rosy, and you can kind of pick this up yourself. So Venezuela's economy grew steadily in the 1900s through the 1960s, but in 1973, the oil crisis hit. So basically, all Persian Gulf countries are part of OPEC decided they're going to refuse to sell to countries that support Israel. So
Hmm.
that's a problem for the US, obviously. And so the price of crude skyrocketed, and the only source of crude that the US had at that time, be, in the middle of like the Cold War and everything else, was Venezuela. And so this resulted in a tremendous growth explosion in Venezuela. Apparently, their economy during this period was 4x before this period. It grew at an astonishingly high rate. And here's where part of the hints come in. The other sectors of of business within Venezuela kind of ceased to operate, and the entire country was entirely working in some capacity on oil production, transportation, or
Hmm.
whatever else.
Hmm.
Estimates of this vary. I saw estimates as high as 96% of the GDP was entirely dependent in some way to oil. Others were placing it at a more conservative 60%, but really no number goes below 60. And that is still a shit ton of your economy to be entirely dependent on one industry, especially an industry where the prices fluctuate so dramatically based on world events.
Hmm.
So, so in this context, if you think about it, your economy is so dependent on this one commodity. What would happen, for example, if Saudi Arabia decided to dramatically increase oil production and flood the market? It would
Hmm.
drop your prices, and your economy would drop as a result of it. So, a side effect of this is also the fact that because your economy had grown so dependent on one particular thing, that there is nothing secondarily for it to kind of back up to as a short-term way to bridge the gap
Hmm.
between that primary thing and everything else. This is actually known as Dutch disease. So this was due to the fact that in 1959 in the Netherlands, they discovered natural gas fields. And they basically stopped all other manufacturing sectors and just worked to support this. And as a result, their economy tanked, like literally the exact same situation happened to them. And so that's why now
Wow.
there's a thing called Dutch disease. So starting in the late 1970s, Venezuela's economy started contracting dramatically for the first time. So I'm just going to throw some numbers at you and feel free to stop me and be like, far as this makes sense or doesn't make sense, or whatever else. So it had gone from 5.65% growth the previous decade, so the 60s, to 1.9% growth. So about 4% contraction. That's really, really bad.
Hmm.
But it gets worse because from that point on, every decade going forward, the economy went into the negatives, meaning growth wasn't slowing down. It stopped and started going backwards, which kind of makes sense when you
Hmm.
think about the fact that I mentioned that most of the people are trying to leave the country, or a ton of them are.
Yeah.
But that's the situation that they found themselves in. So it was with this being kind of the backdrop that Hugo Chavez rose to prominence and power. And the first thing he did was nationalizing the oil companies and distributing their income to citizens. So basically, this is like traditional socialism. The state controls the means of production. The biggest means of production the country had was oil. We're going to control it as a country. So that was his way of kind of moving the country forward. In addition to that, he also reformed the constitution and included removing presidential term limits. So he could basically keep running for office, despite the fact that originally the constitution did have term limits.
Hmm.
Um, as a result of all this, the economy kept slowing down. And obviously, all the things that come along with that ended up happening, right? Murder rates spike, crime rates spike, everything that we would assume would happen happened. Um, he would lay the groundwork for what was going to come next, which is kind of the situation we find ourselves in today. And that is in 2013, his vice president, Nicolas Maduro, announced that Hugo Chavez had died from a massive heart attack, and also his body was apparently riddled with cancer, and that he was
Hmm.
going to take over and basically double down on all of Chavez's policies. He would go on to socializing more parts of the economy, which introduced a ton more waste at a time when the economy was basically contracting anyways. And one story I read was that well, it's complicated. But one story I read was that there was a border patrol, Venezuelan border patrol, that had seized a shipment of contraband from Colombia into Venezuela. And so I was like, okay, cocaine. It's gonna be
Hmm.
cocaine. It's gonna be like something horrible. No, it was food and gas. It was literally food and
Ugh.
gas. Like that's
Yeah.
what they were trying to ship into the country. So pretty much every year since 2013 to 2022, Venezuela has led the world on the global misery index. The only time it was really replaced was in 23 when Argentina took its place due to very similar circumstances, but that's a different story for a different day. During the mid 2010s, Venezuela experienced hyperinflation due to the devaluing of its dollar. Some of these percentages I actually don't really understand. So Bloomberg, for example, reported that in 2018, annual inflation was 448,000%. What
Oh
does
my
that even
God.
mean? I don't even know what that means.
I mean, I feel like it's like in Germany, like before World War II, it was things where like bread was 5 Deutschmarks, and the next day it was 1 million Deutschmarks, you know? So you're like,
Yeah.
my nothing matters anymore because this is just like beyond comprehension for how much things cost.
Well, so there is an equivalency here. I'm going to get to that here in a second. So around this time, kind of to your point there about the Deutschmark piece, stores stopped carrying price tags on things because it didn't matter because minute by
Right.
minute, hour by hour, day by day, the price would fluctuate so dramatically. You just have to ask them in the moment what the price of something was. One podcast I listened to on the topic said that if you had any currency in Venezuela during this time, your best bet was to get rid of it as fast as possible. Get rid of it and buy anything that has some value, like screws or nuts or a hammer. Like get
Hmm.
stuff like that because that will at least retain its value more than the dollar will. Part of this problem was also the fact that Maduro kept mandating minimum wage increases to keep up with increasing inflation, but that basically just created a death spiral. So you can sort of keep up with inflation in the short term until everyone else is also able to keep up with it, which further devalues the dollar and increases the demand for the supply side. So
Hmm.
at this point, it was stated that a school teacher, like somebody who is a school teacher having a school teacher salary in Venezuela, the most they can afford to purchase on 1 month's salary was 2 pounds of cheese and a dozen eggs in a month.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah, one thing I noticed if you research like anything related to like the monetary policies of Venezuela or like Maduro's reign, there's so many videos of just hordes of people in the streets eating out of garbage cans.
Ugh, terrible.
It's crazy. So luckily, the people of Venezuela had a chance to speak and let their voices be heard, because in 2018 was the year of a presidential election and Maduro was on the ballot. He was basically running against a slate of like it doesn't matter who the candidates are because it was all going to be crooked anyways. So it didn't really,
Hmm.
the outcome was almost a foregone conclusion. Also, one thing I learned researching this is when the living situation gets so bad like people stop caring about civics and stop doing things like voting. So, for example, in
Hmm.
this election in 2018, only 32% of the country turned out for it, despite the fact that everybody wanted to get rid of this guy.
Right, but they just like had no hope that it was gonna work.
Yeah, they had no hope it was going to work exactly, and a lot of people were getting killed in protests and being thrown in jail. So, like, there was that piece of it too.
Hmm.
So the international community basically said that once Maduro was elected, quote unquote, they all called it a sham election, saying no way this was like real. The U.S. and the European allies declared that this guy named Juan Guaido was the actual acting president that they would deal with, and that was because he was in the line of succession as the National Assembly Speaker. He wasn't
Hmm.
actually on any ballots, so he just kind of got picked up and placed in that spot. That obviously resulted in Guaido going into exile, and he eventually would settle in Miami with his wife and kids after trying a coup in 2019 to seize power, which failed miserably. That brings us to today, where ballots are again currently being cast, and the hope is that it will be a free and fair election. It will not be a free and fair election. So there's already talks
Hmm.
about how Maduro is telling the poor people that whatever districts vote for him are going to get more food ration because again, the government controls food. They don't.
Oh
They
my
you
God.
can't. And so the people he's trying to. Anyways, it's not going to be a free and fair election. Everybody kind of knows that already. But because of the sanctions that all these other countries are putting on Maduro, he's like, I have to hold this election, otherwise I won't get away from these sanctions, and these people are gonna kill me. Um, let's see. It will be. Wait, where was I leave this? Where did I leave this? Yeah, so on this ballot for today going into tomorrow, it's going to be Maduro versus a guy named Luis Martinez and Edmundo Gonzalez Urrutia. We don't actually care about Luis because the real story here is the unitary platform, which should be the party platform on which Maria Corina Machado runs on, but instead the platform for her stand-in is sorry, the stand-in for her platform is this guy Edmundo. The reason she's out on the ballot was because basically she was a pain in the ass to the government. So she founded a group called
Mm.
Cernate, which I would just describe as a voter turnout and electoral reform nonprofit. She actually led a recall referendum against Hugo Chavez in 2004, and that was like as the economy was kind of collapsing, and like she was one of the first ones to who kind of saw it and started protesting against it. Chavez would declare anybody a part of this organization, especially its founders, traitors, and they face prison time and substantial fines. Um, yeah, this is funny. So Chavez really hated George W. Bush, who was the president at the time.
Hmm.
And so anybody he didn't like who like he didn't like this woman and he like said that she was like a Bush lackey and doing his bidding. He was so petty. One time he went to the UN and he said that the devil spoke here yesterday and I can still smell the sulfur. You remember
Mm-mm.
that? He really hated Bush. It was funny. So in late 2023, she won her party's nomination to run for president. But in the intervening period between her political activity against Chavez and this time period, she was also a huge supporter of Guaido, which the Maduro government saw as a traitor. So because of this, because of the action she took to support Guaido in a peaceful transition of power, she was banned by the government of Maduro to run for official office for 15 years. This is in 2023. Um,
Wow.
yeah, so what she said was, okay, look, I'm in charge of my party. My party's on the ballot. I'm gonna pick this other woman named Karina Yoris as my alternate. That was actually blocked for reasons that I don't totally understand procedurally because she wasn't able to add her name to the ballot. But this other guy was apparently already on the ballot named Edmundo Gonzalez, and that's the person that is running against Maduro really right now. And so they basically just placed him as the alternate. So, in theory, if he were to win, he would be the formal president, while Machado would really be running the show behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's kind of where we are right now, and really like a question like what's gonna end up happening. Polls are estimating that this Edmundo guy is gonna win by a huge, huge landslide.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, as of early July, then Biden and now presumably Harris's team, as well as Trump's team, have both, for all three, I don't know what to say, all have been in touch with Maduro saying,
Mm-hmm.
hey, like, we can give you a soft landing. Like, you don't have to destroy your country, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Because the outcome of that is that if we don't help him find a way to like make this peaceful, then the immigration situation gets even worse. And so it's
Mm-hmm.
all kind of interconnected. But the one thing that did make me think of, Taylor, was something you said before, which is if you can be so liberal that you become conservative, or so conservative you can become
Mm-hmm.
liberal, because Machado is considered like a right-wing extremist because
Mm-hmm.
she doesn't believe in like the first thing she says she's going to do if she takes over is she's going to privatize the oil industry again and privatize all these other
Mm-hmm.
industries, which is considered kind of like a right-wing talking point. She's like, no, like I'm not right-wing. This has this what we're doing is killing all of our people, and so
Yeah.
it's like a I thought I was thinking about that as a good example of what you said of
Yeah, and I think that's what you hear a lot of like Latin Americans are afraid of socialism in America because they have
got
seen
it.
things go so poorly, you know?
Yeah, yeah. When I was living in Miami, the Cubans, man, you never wanted to like tell them you were supporting Democrats. They were so
Yeah.
hard right.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I get it. Like you came here for a reason, to escape that. So,
Hmm.
but anyways, that's what's going on. That's why you're seeing that old dude against Maduro,
Yeah.
is because legally she was barred from being on the ballot, but her party wasn't. And so, as the party leader, the same way kind of Kamala Harris is the party head now of the Democratic Party, so is she.
Hmm.
And so she gets to choose who gets to replace her on the ballot.
Interesting.
Yeah, yeah. But realistically, um, hopefully she wins. It's like a really, really bad situation. Like reading some of the stories about what's going on, I think being in America, we're kind of insulated from a lot of things that you wouldn't even think about. But listen to some podcasts around this. They were talking about how there's just nonstop blackouts all over Venezuela. The government
Hmm.
that has no tax revenue to build infrastructure, much less maintain the infrastructure it has, which means when horrible events happen, the crackdowns on protests happen, or whatever happens, those people go into the hospital that has no power. And apparently, hospitals there are guarded by the military because they don't want you to know how they're taking care of people. One doctor they interviewed who was like his voice was like hidden or whatever.
Hmm.
He was saying like, yeah, the other thing that happens when you don't have good access to like the equipment you need in a functioning hospital is people die, but then the morgue doesn't have power. And so all these bodies
Hmm.
just blowing up in the morgue and it's just horrible. It's a nightmare story.
Where's all the oil?
So the oil is still the oil is still there. It's not that they don't have oil, it's that the price of oil, well, it's twofold. One is the price of oil has fluctuated back and forth to not allow for any stability in their per barrel market share. Um,
Hmm.
there was another point I was going to make there that I'm totally letting go of and forgetting. Oh, the other thing was that they have this concept called billionaires, which is
Hmm.
it's like a derogatory term for the government officials who are basically getting enriched off of the oil and natural resources, and none
Hmm.
of that kind of flowing down. And so it's just equal parts corruption, and the
Yeah.
devaluing of a barrel of crude. But yeah, it was called the Bolivar Revolution. And so the people who are in power, who are now exceedingly rich, like Maduro, are called that
Hmm.
Bolivar heirs.
Wow.
So yeah, nightmare
Sucks.
situation. And
Nightmare.
also, is so wait, your brother's wife, is that what you said, or girlfriend?
Wife. Yeah.
So she raised there?
Yeah, she's from Venezuela. They met in online. He wanted to learn to speak Spanish, and they met online in like a place where you get like paired up with someone. And then she came here on a scholarship to go to school in Oregon, and she only had that for like a semester. But then like he went up there, and then she came down to Vegas, and they lived in Vegas. They've been married for like 10 years. She's been here 10 years. But she's in
Or
surgery right now.
is she really?
Yes, for internal bleeding is what my brother
Oh
says.
my,
So.
oh my God.
I'll keep everyone
I'm
posted. I don't know
sorry.
anything else. I'm just like hearing this from them. It's just wild that like she texted me that today about being excited about the election.
Oh my God. What,
I know.
how's he? Is he in surgery or?
No, he did a CT scan and they said he's okay. And he just is like in pain. He's gonna probably just be in a shit ton of pain, you know?
Jeez. Well,
Ugh.
two things. Obviously, hope she's gonna be okay. And the second is, man, that'd be so interesting to get her perspective on all this.
I know. We'll ask her
To
another
like maybe
day.
like, yeah,
Yeah.
I know. Obviously, like to
Yeah.
interview her and get her perspective, especially after
I'd love to.
results come back.
Yeah. We can ask my brother too.
Yeah,
I'm sure he knows a lot about it. His Spanish is excellent, and so is her
nice.
English. So it worked.
Well, I mean, that kind of has to one or the other.
Yeah. Um,
Sweet.
Yeah, well, cool. Super interesting and interesting that's happening like right now.
Yeah, Dutch disease. I never heard of it. It's
Look
like
at that.
when I first saw that, I was like, is this supposed to be like dengue or something? Like I don't understand. What is
I know it's
Dutch
kind of
disease?
I would think a little I would think maybe like a tree would be involved, you know, but like that's just like a Dutch elm. I don't
Yeah.
know why. Yeah, yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks for taking hearing this through, and especially in the middle of everything you're going through right now. Do you
Thank
have
you.
anything that you want to read out?
I do. I have such an exciting email to share with you. Um, so in November, I was in the middle of my series on volcanoes. And I read a book called Eruption, The Untold Story of Mount St. Helens. And I emailed the author, Steve Olson, and I just said, hey, I did a podcast and your book was the main source. And he wrote back this week and he said, Taylor, I lost this email for months and then suddenly found it. And my wife and I listened to the podcast in the car yesterday. Great job. We laughed all the way down the I-5. Quote, 100% dead, as you described Harry Truman post-eruption, has entered our permanent lexicon.
Aw,
Isn't that cool?
that's so cool.
I know. I'm very excited about it.
Thank you for
So,
listening.
yeah. Yeah, super fun. That's the second time I've emailed an author and been like, I read your book and did a podcast. Also, the woman who wrote the book on the Marling incident, she was like, it was great. I was like, yay.
Well, no, you also did an interview with
Oh yeah, and I
another
interviewed the other
author.
guy too. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
so you're
people
like
respond.
3-0.
Yeah. Pretty fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned Taylor mentioned to me that we got a letter, and I was like, "What is it? What is it?" And you never replied, and I was like, "All right, well,
I
you're
know,
probably
because
gonna say that it's Bryce."
I wanted to tell you live.
It's very exciting, and we got a new fan out of it.
I know.
This is our guerrilla marketing tactic, Taylor. Is you just have to email
One
authors
at a fucking time.
one at a time. Um,
Yeah, but if you want to email us, we're at doomtofailpod@gmail.com on all the socials at doomtofailpod. So please let us know. We'd
please
love to
let us
talk.
know.
Yeah,
Sweet. Okay, well, I'll go ahead and cut things off. If there's nothing else. Are you good?
I'm good. Thank you.
Sweet. Thanks all. Bye.